start, the US ambassador here in South Africa said that he had evidence that weapons had been loaded onto a Russian...
I met with him yesterday. He apologized for being overzealous and saying things that he shouldn't have said.
Yeah, you say he's apologized. We have not heard him himself issue an apology.
Well, I am saying to you, he have apologized. I met him right here in the Revolutionary House.
Hello everyone, this is Mitchpa on ACN, where we connect you to the world one video at a time, creating content that inspires, educates, and entertains, bringing you closer to the action. Following the recent trends, one may begin to think that the only card USA is holding over some African countries is, if you don't follow our orders, we'll take our funding elsewhere. As many African leaders are boldly standing up against the bullies, USA with the use of their media has only been concerned as of what will Africans do, as some of them receive their most foreign aids from the United States of America. Each time an African leader takes a stand on a certain issue which is not favorable to United States of America, the same threat arises. Listen to the following interviews of some Western representatives with some African leaders.
Africa is on strike. Investors now are very negatively disposed to this country. They've lost faith and they've lost trust. For outside investors, they look at the foreign policy, diplomatic orientation of South Africa. They see that right now you are locked in a tense dispute with the United States because the US sees you as deeply sympathetic to Vladimir Putin's Russia, despite the Russian all-out invasion of Ukraine.
We have explained those issues. Our government is dealing with those matters with the United States of America. We are not locked in any dispute of any form. And we are non-aligned when it comes to the conflict in Russia. And that is the line we're pursuing.
Well, the US ambassador here in South Africa said that he had evidence that weapons had been loaded onto a Russian...
I met with him yesterday. He apologized for being overzealous and saying things that he shouldn't have said.
Yeah, you say he's apologized. We have not heard him himself issue an apology.
Well, I am saying to you, he have apologized. I met him right here in the Revolutionary House yesterday.
Your government has launched an investigation about that alleged weapons shipment.
It is correct.
Can you categorically guarantee to me here and now, as the head of the ANC, that no weapons were put on board that vessel?
Our government has reassured the ANC that there is nothing to the truth about weapons being exchanged between our countries.
I phrase my question carefully. Can you now categorically say no weapons were put on board that Russian ship?
I've explained to you that there is a action that has been taken by our government in terms of investigating.
South Africa is a treaty member of the International Criminal Court. If Putin comes here in August as planned, your government will be obliged to arrest him. As head of the ANC, do you believe your government should and indeed will arrest Vladimir Putin?
If it was according to the ANC, we will want President Putin to be here even tomorrow.
You would?
To come to our country. But
you would welcome Vladimir Putin here right now?
Of course we will welcome.
A man who is being investigated for war crimes by the International Criminal Court.
We will welcome him to come here as part and parcel of BRICS, but we know that we are constrained by the ICC in terms of doing that. Putin is a head of state. Do you think that a head of state can just be arrested anywhere? How many crimes have your country committed in Iraq? How many crimes have everyone else who's so vocal today committed in Iraq and Afghanistan? Have you arrested them? You
know the impact that this stand of yours...
You're making a lot of noise.
That's it right there. That's it. I quote, "Do you know the outcome for that stand of yours?" Close quote. Is he trying to say that he knows the outcome for people who speak their truth about their country, or is he saying he knows the outcome of people who speak that which their country stand against, even if it's the truth?
It's about putting a state of working for peace between Ukraine and Russia, and you failed to resolve the war. Where are the weapons of mass destruction? Tony Blair went to Iraq and claimed that they are weapons of mass destruction. Did we see anybody standing against that in the United Kingdom and Britain? More than millions of people have died in Iraq and Afghanistan, and there are no weapons of mass destruction. We know what the war is about.
Mr. Secretary General.
Between Russia and Ukraine, we want peace. That's what is important. so that the world can thrive. And organs and institutions of the world that institute world peace must not be conspicuous by their silence in deciding decisively.
We don't have much time left. I want to bring it back to domestic South African politics before we end.
Following is another interview by Roundtable. Listen as they interview 3 of South Africans on their show, and continue to note how they keep emphasizing the issue of American investments in South Africa, which they claim to be at stake if South Africa do not follow American orders.
South Africa has claimed a policy of so-called non-alignment over the war in Ukraine. At the same time, some have suggested that in reality, it takes the side of Moscow and Vladimir Putin. So why would South Africa support Russia? Well, let's attack the premise of the question first of all. Here in the West, the Western newspapers have been saying of South Africa that they've been a little bit too supportive of Russia and not really neutral in the sense that they've been trying to maintain. Do you think that that's a reasonable charge?
I can certainly understand how South Africa has given that impression that it is softer on Russia because it has stayed out of votes, it has abstained from votes that censures Russia. It had a former president that was very close to Vladimir Putin. And I think that the handling in reaction to the allegations by the US ambassador to South Africa alleging that there was a ship that carried arms from South Africa to Russia may have given that kind of impression. My own feeling is that South Africa shares some values with Russia, such as the need for a more inclusive and multilateral world, may even agree on the reform of the United Nations Security Council. It may even want a de-dollarized world, and it may also have an aversion to an undue extension of NATO. But I think that at heart, South Africa will balance out its interests, which are largely lodged with programs in the United States rather than some of those kind of values, because it has other values as well, such as respect for the sovereign integrity of other sovereign lands, such as that in Ukraine. So I think I understand where the perception comes from. I think South Africa has handled it badly, but I do believe that we will find a balance between our values and our interests, because our interests, if not looked after, could create enormous greater difficulty in South Africa.
You said you can see where the feeling comes from. Do you think it's a fair feeling, though? Do you think it's a fair charge level at South Africa or not? It's difficult maintaining neutrality and treading that line.
I think all things being equal, it may be a fair charge. I think looking where it comes from, for those who have allowed other invasions, those who have allowed other bypasses of democracy and human rights, I think it becomes unfair in a world where things are dealt with simply by virtue of interests rather than values. But I understand the perception is one that may have taken root in the world.
This is from the State Department of the United States. This is a spokesperson in the State Department called Vedant Patel, and they had this to say.
The U.S. has serious concerns about the docking of a sanctioned Russian cargo vessel at a South African naval port in December of last year. And as good partners do, we have raised those concerns directly with multiple South African officials, and I will
sort of slightly ominous there, in a sort of we're not angry, we're disappointed kind of a parental tone. What do you think's going on here?
There has been up to this point a sense of, we're not angry, we're just disappointed, and I think that has now translated into louder and louder frustration. Earlier on in the year, the US ambassador did take out a peace.
This is the issue most African activists have been enlightening Africans about. President Nana Akufo-Addo said, and I quote, "We do not want to remain the beggars of the world. We do not want to be dependent on charity. We can and we should be able to build a Ghana with use of our own resources and their proper management as a way to engineer social and economic growth in our country." In the following video, listen to Professor Pielo Lumumba as he goes into details about African learning to depend on their own and not on others.
If you ask the chair of the African Union who funds the African Union, possibly 60% of the budget is externally funded. He who pays the piper calls the tune. That is the reality of the world. We must begin to pay for our own things in order to be understood and to be respected. In other words, Africa recognizes the need to define herself and to define her agenda. And I do not begrudge nations that define themselves and their agenda. Ronald Reagan once said it, and I agreed with him, that every nation does what is in her best interest. And I have no problem with that. The problem that we have is that at critical moments in African history, we have failed to seize the moment. You will remember in 1917 at the Champaran campaign, Mahatma Gandhi told Charlie Andrews, I do not want you to participate because at this point in time, the Indians must believe that they can do it themselves. In other words, there comes a time in the history of a nation when even friends of goodwill must be told, keep aside. We want to believe that we can do it, and your help must be surreptitious and subterranean if you are a person of goodwill. And the Champaran philosophy is what we must define for ourselves.
Thank you for watching. We appreciate your opinions. So let us know in the comment section, and please don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss out on future videos. Together in solidarity we can make Africa great. Goodbye.